Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our External Consulting webinar series. My name is Tony Chiak, and I serve as the unit head within Management, Engineering, and Consulting. During this webinar, we will discuss Mayo Clinic's unique application of artificial intelligence and the collaboration with IBM researchers and the IBM Watson system to help optimize patient matching for clinical trials. This program also will discuss other current and potential applications of AI, human augmented intelligence, and related topics in healthcare. First, I would like to share some information about Mayo Clinic and our department, Management, Engineering, and Consulting. Here's some information on the Mayo Clinic enterprise. In Rochester, we see approximately 400,000 patients per year with 2,380 physicians and scientists, including 125 primary care providers. In the community and regional health system, we have it set up in 4 regions with 18 hospitals, and we are in 75 communities in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. The Mayo Clinic Health System sees approximately 525,000 patients per year with 1,140 physicians. We also have another site in Arizona. At the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, we see approximately 115,000 patients per year with 621 physicians and scientists. And in the Mayo Clinic in Florida, we see approximately 110,000 patients per year with 559 physicians and scientists. Now I'd like to share some information on Management, Engineering, and Consulting Department at Mayo Clinic. MENC was founded in 1947 and have been engaged in healthcare consulting business for over 70 years. Our mission is to partner with clients to achieve the best patient experience through objective, innovative, and integrated business consulting. And our key capability is end-to-end internal and external consulting across practice, research, education, and administration within an enterprise setting. And here are a few details about our staff in Management, Engineering, and Consulting. We have approximately 200 team members made up of health systems engineers, project managers, and support staff. We pride ourselves in attracting and retaining a very diverse workforce. We have been able to attract diversified and talented staff that have lived and worked in 36 different countries. We also have a very multidisciplinary educational background and experience. We have staff that come from business administration, nursing, organizational leadership, engineering, finance, economics, public health, and many other industries. In MENC, we have 5 main service lines. The first is Management Systems and Process Engineering, where we apply a variety of engineering tools to improve business performance, such as Lean Six Sigma, advanced analytics, simulation modeling, and optimization. We help integrate multiple disciplines to study and solve complex problems using a systems approach. The next is Strategy, Design, and Execution. We help develop and refine business objectives, define key business measurements, and accelerate design and development of key strategic initiatives. The next is Change Management Organizational Transformation. This involves vision design and development, change management planning, and implementation of best practices. The next is Revenue Enhancement and Expense Management. We work on business process redesign to decrease operational expense, improve supply chain efficiency, and identify new revenue opportunities. The final one is Project Management, where we utilize a structured and disciplined methodology framework to deliver improvement plans to complex projects. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. Our first guest speaker is Dr. Tufia Haddad, Chair of Breast Medical Oncology Practice at Mayo Clinic Rochester, and she is the Chair of Health IT for the Department of Oncology. Dr. Haddad is an active member of the Mayo Clinic Cancer Center, Women's Cancer Research Program, and the Breast Cancer Standards Council. Her research focuses on experimental therapeutics and early phase clinical trials for drug-resistant breast cancer. She also has interest in models of healthcare delivery and oncology and the transformation of such models with novel artificial intelligence and connected health technology solutions. Dr. Haddad also has an interest in how these tools can help alleviate physician workload burden and reduce stress in our careers. Our next guest speaker will be Vanessa Boyle. Vanessa is an health system engineer in Florida unit. She holds a master's degree in health administration from the University of Florida. Vanessa began her career at Mayo Clinic as an associate health systems engineer in the research and education unit. One of Vanessa's many contributions includes working with the Watson clinical trial matching team since February 2018. So I'd like to start with Dr. Haddad and interview her. So the focus of today's session is on AI in healthcare and its evolving use and how we can make clinicians more efficient and research. So how did you get started and introduced to AI, and also how does AI, connect with the clinical trials that you're working on?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity here today. Certainly, I did not have any training or background in computer science or artificial intelligence. I went through the normal training, as most physicians do, through medical school, different residency program, fellowship program in oncology, and I've garnered some research experience as well throughout my training and now into my career. The opportunity to become engaged in artificial intelligence and the use of AI tools to help improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our healthcare delivery today really just was being in the right place at the right time, really. Our leaders at Mayo Clinic recognize that AI has the potential to be completely transformative to research, to practice, and to education as well. And they wanted to work with an industry leader to evaluate and potentially develop AI tools together. And the IBM Watson Health team had a clinical trial matching solution that they were working on, and they were interested in partnering again to evaluate, to co-develop, and from the Mayo perspective, we had this need to try and improve enrollment to clinical trials so that we can better, more efficiently advance science, our research mission, to really ensure that we are providing our patients with the very best in cancer, specifically in this case, cancer prevention, screening, diagnostics, and treatment, therapeutics. So really it was through this relationship where I became involved and first exposed to Watson. So my first experience with AI was working with Watson for clinical trial matching.
Okay, great. So before we get too far into our conversation, how would you define AI and how it relates to augmented human intelligence?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are many definitions out there for artificial intelligence. I guess how I like to think of it, and specifically in the context of healthcare. AI is really the use of computer science programming, whereby computers think, interpret, and learn similar to how humans do. Every day we are ingesting data, whether it's abstracting information from what we read. We interpret that information. Similarly, we make observations when we're driving, walking down the hallway. We're always taking in data. And similarly, computers have the ability to take in healthcare data, whether it's information in the electronic health record, whether it's images, such as pathology specimens, images from radiology, CT scans. Computers can take that information in, analyze it. It can solve problems. It has the ability to predict or anticipate problems based on that data ingestion and interpretation. And importantly, it also has the ability to learn. And I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes AI is the ability to learn and self-teach so that it can adapt and, with increasing experience, improve accuracy and efficiency.
Great. There are many challenges in the research, especially around recruiting patients for clinical trials. Mm-hmm. In the past, you had mentioned only about 3% of oncology patients are actually enrolled in clinical trials. Can you talk about how many clinical trials are going on at Mayo Clinic and nationwide, and also the barriers that patients face and also the barriers that clinicians face in getting patients enrolled in the most relevant clinical trials?
Yeah. So, clinical trials are so critical for us to, first and foremost, translate what is learned in the lab, what is learned from research, and to then apply it to patient care. In this case, in this example, we're looking at clinical trials for cancer treatment specifically. And as you stated, only about 3 to 5% of patients with cancer participate in clinical trials. Probably the biggest barrier that patients face with clinical trials and participating in trials is simply a lack of awareness about opportunities that may exist for them. Their healthcare providers really are the gatekeepers to those opportunities, and unless they are approached by their healthcare provider, they may never know that they may be eligible for a trial, despite the fact they may be highly motivated and interested. I think on the provider end, similarly, it's really challenging. So here at Mayo Clinic, for cancer care specifically, we have over 1,000 clinical trials that are active. Half of those, 500 trials, that are actually open and enrolling, recruiting new patients to participate in the studies. I'm a breast cancer specialist. In breast cancer specifically, roughly 100 clinical trials that are available, and it's very difficult, even for someone like myself, who is a subspecialist, heavily engaged, active in research, to keep on top of that many different studies. So the awareness of the studies, the complexity of the inclusion-exclusion criteria for each of these studies, and then again, very importantly, time. There is simply not enough time for us to be, in addition to making sure we're offering the very best standard care to our patients, to also allocate time to manually run that list of 100 trials and see which ones may be a match for our patients. So time is a very big barrier as well for our providers, despite very good intentioned clinicians who want to be engaged in research and offering studies to their patients.
Great. Can you talk about your partnership with IBM Watson Clinical Trials Matching Team, and how did you introduce them to the complexities of the Mayo practice research and clinical trials and kind of the capabilities of Watson?
Right. So certainly it is a partnership. Mayo Clinic, we bring our very best clinicians and nurses and research staff, coordinators, research nurses, in addition to our clinical staff. We bring the knowledge, the expertise, the experience of working with patients with cancer, and also the ability to know how to navigate the EHR to pull out those critical tumor cancer data elements that are locked in the EHR, how we can pull out that information. And we share that then with IBM's team. So they bring the computer scientists, the data scientists, and we work collaboratively to train the system. And we do that again, very collaboratively, so that we can continue to iterate and improve the accuracy, the efficiency of the system to be able to match any individual patient, leveraging, again, multiple data elements relative to that patient's cancer, the stage of their disease, location of their disease, important genomic biomarkers associated with their disease, as well as their therapies, the prior treatments that they've received, just to name a few of these different data elements. And again, to then match that information to what is required for eligibility in order to participate in any number of different clinical trials.
Great. So Vanessa Boyle is going to talk about the project, but can you talk about how you as a clinician partnered with management engineering consulting to take a very complex system and simplify it by developing a business solution and then integrating it into a complex clinical practice?
Right. So when we first had completed training for the first cancer, which was breast cancer, and we felt that Watson was matching patients to clinical trials very efficiently and with very high accuracy, we felt this was ready then to bring into the practice. So again, allowing, what we did was train all of our physician staff, our nurse practitioners, physician assistants, nurses, our fellows, everyone was trained to use this system, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. People knew immediately that this was transformative. It was incredibly efficient and much better, more effective than the manual method of doing this all, just leveraging PDF protocols. Now, despite that, when we went live and asked our clinicians to be screening their patients at point of care with the tool, for about 2 weeks, there was a lot of great interest and people were using the system. And by the third and fourth week, maybe half the clinicians were using it for about half the patient visits. And, within a month, unfortunately, people were really no longer using it. And I think that was probably one of the most important learnings from our experience with this project, was that you can develop a really sophisticated, high-performing AI tool, but you can't just drop it in the clinic. So we had to pause at that time, and this is when we engaged Vanessa and Marissa and our MENIC resources to work with us to redesign the workflow. And we knew that our goal was to make sure that our clinicians had a list of trials for each patient that they would be seeing at the patient encounters. And how could we work back from that goal and sort of deconstruct the existing workflow and leverage the right resources then to find success. And we had a 6-month sprint and several meetings with our MENIC team, leading and working together with our Watson team. And from there, we were able to design a successful workflow. And with our second implementation, then 6 months later, we had immediate success. And it was very clear, just looking at early data and early results, we were very quickly increasing the enrollment to our breast cancer clinical trials.
Yeah, I think seeing kind of the future with this development of these business solutions using AI to simplify complex, problems is, could be easy, but then integrating it into the workflow and making it not a burden on the physician is going to be very important going into the future. So
that's exactly right. The truth was clinicians were doing this work, screening their patients for trials before clinic, after hours, weekends. It was something that typically was not done at point of care because there simply is not enough time in a very busy clinic. So we had to really remove the screening from the clinician's plate, and we have a research team of study coordinators who are doing the validation of the matches with Watson, and then again bringing that list of trials to the provider's attention, have research nurse coordinators now as well that are able to really improve the odds and success of ensuring that our clinicians are talking to the patients about study opportunities.
Good, great. I'm glad we were able to help you. So clearly you believe Watson and AI and other related tools will play an increasing role in healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about what's on your radar, what you're working on, and kind of what you see for the future to help healthcare?
Yeah. I think, similarly as we can train systems and tools that can match patients to clinical trials, similarly, we'd like to make sure that we are offering our very best standard care and best practices to patients as well. So I think those types of tools we will see increasingly in the future to make sure that we are abiding by best practice and national and international guidelines, and really using evidence-based medicine to deliver the best possible patient care. The medical knowledge is growing at a rate that is impossible for our clinicians to keep up with. And I'll use the example of oncology again. In cancer care, last year there were 51 new drugs that were approved by the FDA or expanded indications for existing drugs. A decade ago, that number was about 7 to 8 per year. So we are just on this trajectory with new drug development, and these are our FDA-approved agents. So these are, again, standard practice, but it's increasingly difficult for busy clinicians to be keeping up with these advances, very rapid advances in medical knowledge. So I think tools, AI tools, have the potential to help clinicians keep abreast of the very best in healthcare, in medical knowledge as research advances, and to make sure that we are always offering our patients the very best care. So those are the clinical decision support tools that I foresee will continue to be developed and implemented into the clinical practice. On the other hand, AI is also being used to improve the accuracy of diagnoses. Again, leveraging these computer science programming to analyze complex information in biopsy specimens, in pathology images, in radiology images, so that we can be more accurate when humans and computers, these AI tools, are working together to, again, improve outcomes, accuracy of diagnosis.
Great. Physician burnout is a big issue at Mayo and nationally. How do you think the use of AI will reduce the stress and the burden on physicians?
This is such an excellent question, and indeed, it's not unique to our own organization. In fact, Mayo has led much of the research on physician as well as nursing, APP, burnout rates, over 50% in most organizations today. We know that burnout is critical. It doesn't just impact providers, it impacts patient outcomes and patient care and patient safety and patient satisfaction, their experience with healthcare. So it's vitally important to our healthcare workforce and to our patients that we address physician burnout. Where I think AI has the potential, again, to be very impactful is providing that clinical decision support. Again, trying to keep up with the advances in medical knowledge and in research is an increasingly impossible task. It's a wonderful problem to have. On the other hand, trying to navigate the electronic health record today and to find the information you need to help take care of a patient is increasingly challenging as well. There is so much information that is harnessed in the electronic health record, and to find the information you need takes an incredible amount of time. In addition to this, we're moving into an era where now genomic data, so patients, genetic information. In cancer, we deal with the tumor genetic information, and in addition to the patients, their inherited their DNA and genomic information. That information, add that now to all the existing information in the electronic health record. Patients are increasingly have wearable devices. We're getting information about their activity, their sleep patterns. They're reporting symptoms to us, this patient-generated health data. So the reason I'm belaboring this point is we just have an incredible amount of data that will only continue to grow. And for us to be able to interpret all of that information regarding each individual patient and to match it with all the information in PubMed, in research, in clinical trials, so that we can provide the very best care for each individual patient. Again, we're going to have to leverage AI tools to help us more efficiently abstract all that information, interpret it, have insights into what that information means for each individual patient. So that, again, we can provide the very best care that is matched to their genomic profile, that is matched to the information, the data they're generating through different wearable devices and sensors, and again, match that with all the very best in research, so we can make, again, the right diagnosis and the right treatment, get it right the first time, so that we can have the best possible outcome.
Great. So you're one of our leaders, I think, in AI. What about those who are new to AI? Where would they go to just gain this knowledge that you have?
My knowledge has come from experience and exposure, and so I think that really is the key, because none of us, the majority of us in medicine, do not come from a computer science or data science background. So I think first and foremost is just trying to increase our exposure and to search for opportunities. For those who are interested, I think increasingly we will see more training opportunities at different universities or medical centers. I think as well, some of the technology giants in AI will also be looking for ways that they can help train today's healthcare workforce, as well as those who are in training today. I think this will increasingly become part of routine medical training, nursing school training as well.
Oh, great, good. So our typical audience is pretty diverse. We have staff from small hospitals all the way to academic medical centers to a large national health system. What advice would you give to leaders in community hospitals on how they can incorporate AI into their institution?
Yeah, so certainly I would say first and foremost, I think AI and these different AI tools in healthcare are still largely in research phases. There are some great publications that are coming out about advances that we're making with some of these AI tools. Only a handful have actually gone from that discovery phase into translating it and applying it to our clinical practice. So I think until we see a little more maturity of these tools, it may be too early to be looking at incorporating these tools into practice for really any medical organization at this time. However, I think the landscape is changing. The research and these partnerships between technology companies and partnerships with medical institutions, as that continues to grow, as the research advances, and we show positive impact on provider experience, again, improving their efficiency, improving their effectiveness, and ultimately improving patient outcomes. That's when I think would be the right time to be looking at adopting some of these tools to best, help support smaller organizations as well as larger organizations. And it really will come down based on the business need as well for what may be unique from one healthcare organization to the next.
Good. So if you look out like 5 years, and from a healthcare consumer perspective, how do you see that person, and how do you see AI affecting that person's health and healthcare?
So that's such a great question. When I look at how we will be transforming today's experience for patients, I think what I would hope to see and anticipate we'll see over the next 5 years would be, at least for the visits that happen in the office, I would anticipate that the computers will kind of, and the technology in the room will kind of fall to the wayside, and we will see clinicians using their voice to ask for information from the electronic health record, from the computer. I think it'll be much more interactive in that regard. And I think clinicians will increasingly be able to spend more time with their patients doing direct care, face-to-face care. That to me would be a huge victory if we could flip this ratio. Today, for every 1 hour of face-to-face time clinicians spend with their patients, they spend 2 hours doing indirect patient care, the majority of which is leveraging a computer. What I foresee happening over the next 5 years is a total flip in that ratio, where we are leveraging AI to do data synthesis, health record summarization, pulling out important data and insights, and allowing us to again, spend less time with the computer and more time with our patients. But I also think there's opportunity. We certainly know that increasingly telehealth is probably one of the greatest areas of growth right now in healthcare, in addition to AI. I think we will, 5 years from now, increasingly be taking care of patients in their home. We'll meet them where they are, rather than the current system that really requires patients to travel to us to come for care. I think we will be able to better remotely monitor our patients in between visits. We really do not do that at all today. But I think with technology, we will be able to monitor symptoms, monitor their physiologic data, monitor their medication adherence, all through digital tools. And I think where we can apply AI is being able to know when a patient is doing well and can stay at home and continue on, versus trying to identify patients earlier when they are struggling, when they're having difficulty managing their diabetes, managing their pain. You know, we can, with remote monitoring and with these algorithms, we can intervene earlier and prevent crises that may land them in the emergency department or hospital, requiring a hospitalization for acute care. So I think that's where AI can also be so transformative, is in how we are better able to care for patients outside of the clinic, where they spend the vast majority of their time at home.
Great. Do you foresee a day when patients and providers in a community hospital have ready access to all these AI tools and just make the care of delivery much more efficient?
I think that's certainly the direction we are moving in. I think we have to be, again, selective about the tools that we use. We want to make sure that they have been rigorously validated, that they are generalizable to the patient population, that there is research, again, showing not only that they have been validated, but that they improve the clinicians' efficiency, effectiveness, and that ultimately, again, that translates to better patient outcomes, better quality of life, better symptom management, better management of their chronic condition. Those are the tools where we really need to invest in.
Great. Well, I want to really appreciate you taking time out of your day today. You are a true leader here at Mayo in AI, and I think management engineering consulting will have a great partnership with helping with developing these business solutions and incorporating them into the workflow so it reduces the burden on physicians. So I thank you so much. We're so lucky to have you at Mayo Clinic.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Now
I'd like to turn it over to Vanessa to talk about the project with IBM.
Thank you, Tony and Dr. Haddad. I'm glad to be here sharing this project with everyone today. Currently, I am a health systems engineer in the Florida unit, and I've been working on the Watson project for about a year and a half. Every project starts out with a problem to solve, and to provide the full context here, I'll share why we've partnered with IBM to introduce Watson clinical trial matching at Mayo Clinic, and then how I got involved in the project. Just to recap some of what was discussed between Dr. Haddad and Tony, I just quickly want to define artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is designed to perform tasks that normally require human thinking. And that can really vary from decision-making with visual or speech recognition. And there's really several branches here under AI. The branch that's most applicable to today's presentation and Watson CTM is natural language processing, or NLP. And NLP allows computers to process, understand, and analyze large amounts of human language data. And for example, this is great for in healthcare when we're looking at clinical notes in the electronic medical record. Sometimes AI is interchangeably used with machine learning, but that's really not the case, and I'll dive a little deeper into that with my next slide. So what is Watson CTM? Watson CTM is a web-based application that uses natural language processing to provide a high-level clinical trial match. Watson does this by comparing EMR data against eligibility criteria for open clinical trials here at Mayo Clinic. Currently, we have Watson's machine learning functionality turned off, and there's a couple reasons for that. One of them being that we are still training or programming the system in certain disease groups, and so we don't want Watson to draw any conclusions on those patterns yet. Overall, we've seen a growth in healthcare for the amount of data and information to support decision-making. Specifically on the research side, we've seen an exponential increase in the number or studies on the clinical trials registry and an accelerated rate of FDA approvals. Clinical trial enrollment generates its own set of barriers both for the patient and the provider as well. Some examples of these patient barriers might be fear over being placed in the placebo group or insurance companies not providing coverage. Physician barriers are often related to time constraints. limited personnel to consistently screen patients, or even the complex inclusion-exclusion criteria that is not codified in the protocol or EMR. However, the primary reason patients do not participate in studies is because they were not offered one. And that's really where Watson fits into the picture here at Mayo Clinic. The team went live with Watson in breast oncology January 2016 as a point-of-care tool for providers. However, the initial adoption and use was low, and that makes complete sense when we remember that one of the barriers for our providers is time constraints. This was the point where the project team reached out to MENC to develop a process to screen for clinical trial matches prior to patient visits. My colleague Marissa was engaged in the project at that time and worked with the stakeholders to relaunch Watson with the revised workflow. And as a result, our clinical trial enrollment increased. And another result of that was that the clinical research coordinators had less time to screen patients. With the increased clinical trial enrollment, they were spending more time coordinating schedules and monitoring more research activities and subjects. And that was the time when I actually joined the project team, and it was determined that we would rework the process to have a Watson screening team balance workload and create a seamless process. The main takeaway that I think could really apply to any IT or AI implementation was the importance of considering how the technology is going to integrate into the broader practice workflow. When we reworked the process, there was an 80% increase in clinical trial enrollment into Mayo's systemic therapy trials, and that was only 11 months after implementation. Based on these findings, we created a standard implementation plan that we follow whenever we roll out to a new disease group. First, I take the time to understand the current workflow and how the group screens for clinical trials. Then I work with the stakeholders to define a future state process using Watson. We then pilot the process for a few weeks and make adjustments before we officially go live with Watson CTM. As with any software, it takes time to facilitate behind-the-scenes work. Releases with new functions and features are installed and tested monthly. Selected trial data is added from the consolidated epicenter, and patient records are batched, processed overnight, and imported in real time for use. Using this technology, Mayo Clinic screeners take several steps for patients arriving the next day for appointments. For each patient, the screener will validate Watson's patient attribute values, qualify the matches made by Watson to clinical trials, highlight particularly preferable trials, and then finally print the results for delivery to the oncology floor. The next day, when patients are being roomed, the patient's trial matches are stapled to the rooming sheet. At this time, the clinician has what they need to have that informed discussion about potential trials. I have an ongoing role in the Watson project team, and our past experience has shaped the tasks that I'm involved in. I will first mention that this is very much a team effort, and I work closely with the project manager, business analyst, screening team, and several others. Since our initial implementation, we have continued to expand Watson into other cancers and medical oncology, and we're also working to bring Watson to the southern sites this year. All these efforts require evaluating the current state and working with practice stakeholders to propose a streamlined process that incorporates Watson into the existing infrastructure. I also lead certain analytical efforts like comparing the time to screen an individual patient for clinical trial matches with Watson versus the traditional manual method. In between the business analyst and me, we are always making sure to extend Watson's use so that we are identifying all the potential patients that would benefit from a clinical trial match. To summarize, the value that I bring to the Watson team is knowledge and skill in process engineering, data analytics, and change management. And for the time remaining in the presentation, I'll highlight each of these components with examples and explain the importance of those elements. The majority of my work in Watson involves process engineering. Before we look at implementation, my first step is to document the current state. Then I work with the business analysts and stakeholders to recommend a future state process that takes into consideration Watson capabilities, Mayo practice workflow, and also efficiency. The goal is to create a process that is simple and causes no disruption to the staff or the patient encounter. These are some of the examples of the process mapping that I've done with the team. The first one is our recommended process for a centralized screening team when we go live in Florida and Arizona. The next one is a process developed to offer clinical trial screening for e-consults and e-review patients. And depending on the process and the requirements, I'll work with the screening team to write standard operating procedures which also helps with training and streamlining the workflow. Another component of the work is to provide data analytics as it relates to process measures. The business analyst will evaluate Watson CTM and the effectiveness or impact of the tool, but here I was looking to compare the Watson screening process for breast oncology and lung oncology compared to a traditional manual method. What we found was that Watson CTM assisted patient matches were completed in less than 50% of the time as compared to the traditional method. And that means that our screeners can provide a high-level clinical trial match in 15 minutes using Watson, whereas it would take approximately 30 minutes to do so manually. The last example of the work I've completed to date focuses on change management strategies and methodologies. It requires a huge effort, specifically with communication and coordination, to implement AI into the practice area. Up front, we spend some time conducting a stakeholder analysis, as it gets closer to implementation, we work on our communication strategy. Overall, what we found works is to do a soft launch, which involves a small pilot with our physician sponsor in the disease group. From there, we roll out to the other providers in the oncology group, and we give an initial month to assess system needs or make process adjustments. So to conclude, I'm really proud to be working with this team, and we've accomplished a lot, but there's still a long road ahead of us. I just want to thank Dr. Haddad for being a wonderful physician sponsor, and on behalf of the entire Watson team, we really do appreciate everyone's support to make Watson CTM work here at Mayo Clinic. And now I'll turn it back over to Tony and Dr. Haddad in Rochester to answer any questions from the audience.
Very nice job, Vanessa. Thank you so much for all your work, and thank you for leading the effort from a clinician perspective. So we have several questions here. This one was for Dr. Haddad. Is there a patient story or anecdote you use to share the power of this technology to help your patients and their families, and does one stand out that you can share today?
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to share one, because there is one in particular, and it was actually a patient of my own. I met her, a new patient, new diagnosis of stage 4, so incurable breast cancer. She had disease that was present in her bones, in her lymph nodes, in addition to the primary tumor in her breast. And we went through the visit, and we talked about the standard approaches. And my nurse practitioner had joined me in the room and just kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, I want to make sure that you saw the list of clinical trials before you wrap up the visit here today. And again, even though I'm heavily involved in research, I write clinical trials, I conduct clinical trials, I know our portfolio really quite well. I forgot about a study for this patient. And it was one that was operating under our phase 1 clinical trial program, so I was a little less familiar. And again, because we had that matching list right there in the room, and with my wonderful nurse practitioner, we quickly called the study coordinator. There was availability, the study was open. We talked to the patient about the study. It made excellent sense. It was very well aligned with the standard practice, but had an investigational drug also included that in laboratory studies has shown to be more effective than our standard conventional chemotherapy. So with that, we talked to the patient, we counseled her about study participation, and she was grateful for the opportunity. She enrolled. 2 months later on study, when she came back and we repeated her scans, she had what we call a complete imaging response to therapy, so you could no longer really visualize the cancer in her body. She has maintained that now. We'll hit the 2-year mark on this clinical trial in December. And that 2 years with first-line therapy far exceeds our average, our median time for patients who are not on clinical trials, where that average time is more on the order of 6 to 8 months. So this treatment has had a profound impact on her care, and she has an excellent quality of life. She's doing all the things she was doing before breast cancer. She her story is incredible. So that one always stands out to me, because even myself, who is wholeheartedly championing this work and this program, may have missed an opportunity that day had that list not been surfaced to me.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Gee whiz. Wow. Okay, we'll try to top that one. I don't know if we'll top that one, but here's another question for you. We will see additional clinical trials and other diseases and specialties come online in the near future. Are there other specialties at Mayo Clinic who are using or planning to use Watson for their specialty clinic trials beyond cancer care?
Yeah, so we certainly want to continue to expand, and we have expanded the training beyond breast cancer, where we started. We've now implemented the system for lung cancer, gynecologic cancers. The system's been trained for gastrointestinal cancers, and we're just weeks away from a full launch in clinical implementation there. We're also trained for genitourinary cancers. We're currently training for hematologic, blood-based cancers, leukemia, lymphomas. So we continue to work through all of oncology and also moving beyond drug-based therapies. So looking at radiation therapy trials, surgical trials, as well as potentially moving to have the system trained to match patients to cancer prevention trials, looking at new ways we can prevent or potentially more accurately diagnose cancer. So indeed, our initial interest has been in oncology, but we certainly recognize, I think the proof of concept, has been established now that we can do this, that this is feasible work. Oncology is really difficult. So I think, as I look to new opportunities in cardiology, in neurology, in other specialties, that certainly is our hope and goal. I also would acknowledge that there are many other technology companies that are also in this space and using AI tools for clinical trial matching. And some that are available today that can support, again, other conditions beyond cancer. So there is a lot of active work in this space.
Wow, great. Good. Vanessa, this is a question for you. How did you introduce the process improvement tools to the team, and how did you gain their input in the middle of busy clinical days? Were you able to carve out time necessary for this work?
Well, thanks, Tony. A lot of the process improvement tools really revolve around our flowcharts and our swim lane diagrams, which really outlines everyone's role in the process. I usually try to do much of the flowcharting behind the scenes, so when we do meet, I can really optimize our time together to assess opportunities for efficiency gains or other areas that we should do PDSA cycles on. I feel really lucky that we actually have physician sponsors in each disease group that are very engaged and invested in making Watson CTM work here at Mayo. So although we are all very busy, provider scheduling has never had a negative impact on our project team.
Great. This is one for both Vanessa and Dr. Haddad. Thank you for your bravery to share how the implementation did not go as planned. And thank you for staying with your vision on how the clinical trial matching system was going to help our patients and our colleagues. Any additional lessons learned that you'd care to share with us?
Yeah, so I certainly appreciate that comment, because it's difficult to acknowledge failure. But there were incredible lessons learned, and again, bringing in the MENIC team really allowed us to find a new way, a new workflow that allowed us to achieve success. I think it's so important that we were transparent about our initial failure, because I think as other healthcare organizations look to leverage systems like this for clinical trial matching or for other potential solutions, I think it is critical that they think about the implementation process, studying that implementation process, looking at metrics, and not giving up if all doesn't go well the first time. So I'd hate for people to give up on the promise of tools like this without having access or the support of health systems engineers. So I just wanted to say that first and foremost. But in terms of other learnings, I think one of the other really critical learnings is, and maybe we would have seen more success with clinicians using it at point of care, is if there was full integration of the AI tool within our electronic health record. So, when we are busy at point of care, we are spending the majority of our time getting the information we need from the electronic health record. And perhaps if the system had better communication and integration directly within the EHR so that the information was right there at our fingertips, I think perhaps we may have seen more success with our providers using it directly at point of care. So EHR integration is something else that I think is really critical for the success of these tools in the future.
Great. Well, this is an interesting question here for Dr. Haddad. So you use AI in your day-to-day work at Mayo Clinic. Are you a fan of AI-enabled technology in the home, such as Siri and Alexa and Google and Nest?
Let's see. Do I have them? Yes. Do I use them? Yes. I think they do provide some limited value today, but I think as those systems become more sophisticated and learn, and I think the opportunities to provide more value, I think, back to the people who use these systems will continue to grow. And I certainly think the potential for these personal assistants and to be able to really impact healthcare, I think the potential is actually great. I foresee a future where patients are engaging with whichever assistance they use in a way where their care plan, they may get components of their care plan saying, remember to take your medication, or did you take your medication today? As just one example. Or if I have a question, if I'm experiencing a new symptom, I would like to know that the answer I get back, if I ask, I have a new headache today, should I be concerned about this? I anticipate a future where there will be a response, and hopefully a response that's driven by Mayo Clinic knowledge and expertise, so that people are getting, well-validated information in response to that. But I think these voice-enabled personal assistants really can be transformative in healthcare too.
Okay, interesting. All right. Can you add a little bit more detail on how you work with the clinical trials matching system? Is there a team coordinator who comes through with a list of patients selected by Watson for detailed eligibility?
So that's a great question. We know part of the solution here in making this system work in the clinical practice is just getting that list of clinical trials to our clinicians. So as Vanessa alluded to, that the screening coordinators are working with the Watson system the day prior to a patient's visit at Mayo. And we're also looking at ways we can provide clinical trial matching even for our virtual patients. So patients who do not necessarily come to Mayo, but we are asked to provide an expert opinion regarding the patient's care through their local institution. We should also be thinking about clinical trials for those patients as well. So so I think as we, there are definitely additional opportunities to be using the system beyond that.
Okay, great. So just to comment here, thank you for seeing the big picture, the use of AI in related fields to help healthcare professionals focus on the needs of the patient. We applaud you and your colleague for the hard work in this area. Well, good job. That's a great way to end the webinar. So I would like to thank everybody, and I'd like to thank our guest speakers and everyone for attending our Management, Engineering, and Consulting webinar. Please feel free to contact us by calling us at 507-284-2999 3424 or visiting our website at mec.mayoclinic.org if you have any questions about our external consulting services.